Finding Feminism, quite an interesting talk. I think University of East Anglia was the recent one to ban the sale of the Sun, taking about 20 unions around the country banning the sale of the Sun over this issue. So we're going to have a talk for a short while, and then there's going to be a Q&A afterwards. And then after that, we're going to go to interval for a few drinks, sort of continue the debate in a sort of light-hearted manner, and we've got some vouchers for money off drinks as well if you just want to have a drink. Okay?
Okay.
Over to Lucy.
Alright, I think I'm just going to stand here and talk. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello. So my name's Lucy, and I started a campaign called No More Page 3 last summer. And quite a bit random, really, that I started a campaign, because I'd never campaigned on anything before, and I probably wouldn't have said I was a feminist before. In fact, I didn't even think of No More Page 3 as a feminist campaign until on the first day lots of people were tweeting the word feminism, and I was like, oh, blimey, feminism, okay. This is what I've been exploring for a couple of months on a blog. It's feminism, yeah. I haven't just come up with these things. It's feminism. Wow. Because before the campaign, I did acting actually, and I've got some nice memories of Sheffield because I've worked at the Crucible twice, so I've had some really lovely memories of being in Sheffield. So as long as I don't balls it up tonight, hopefully that will continue with my nice memories of Sheffield. So I was doing acting, and then I started writing. And I've written 4 novels, and they're basically, I used to say, they're romantic comedy novels, but you probably would use the term chick-lit for them. So I'd written chick-lit novels, and I've kind of been getting a bit frustrated, shall we say, with writing these novels. I really enjoyed writing them, and then I'd get to this position with marketing and PR people, with my publishers, and things like the covers of my books, and they'd show you the cover, and I'd sit there going, before I look, and I'd be, please don't put a cupcake on my cover. Please don't put a cupcake on my cover. Oh, they bloody put a cupcake on my cover. It was every time, and it was weird. And then I had this thing with the 3rd novel. I wanted to write a story about a woman who had an abortion. And because I heard that 1 in 5 women had an abortion, and I just really wanted to explore that. And I was told I couldn't. I was told it was a no-no. It was a no-no. And I was like, how can that be a no-no? This is a really, important thing that I feel I should explore, and I'm being told I can't. And I felt I sold out, because I actually wrote a story about a woman who was going to have an abortion, and then she lost the baby. So I felt I'd really sold out. I still loved the book, but I felt I'd sold out. They didn't put a cupcake on the cover. However, they did make this book look like a Disney cover. And it was there was sex in the first chapter, and it wasn't particularly good sex. There was no condom, she had to take the morning after pill. And it was and I just really felt that I'd been marketed with this Disney cover, and it just really annoyed me. And then with the next book I wrote, I wanted to explore, a character who suffered from mental illness, which I did, but I kept being told to make her more every woman. Make this character more every woman. And I think what that meant was that she had to be really worried about the size of her bottom, or, I don't know, and I just kept thinking, what is this every woman? I know loads of women, and we're really kind of complicated and interesting, and I feel like I'm not being allowed to express how complicated and interesting these characters are because of marketing and PR. Anyway, so that was kind of the background to what was going on. So after the 4th novel, I took a bit of time out to write a blog where I wanted to explore kind of being a woman's stuff in a blog. And the catalyst really for the blog, and for me finding feminism really, was typing in, the catalyst was, I'm sharing quite a lot quite early now. I was looking at online porn one night, okay, and, I was single and feeling a bit aroused, went to online porn, because that's what I thought you should do when you're single and a bit aroused. So I went into online porn and so these sites where you just get, these free sites. I am sharing quite a lot, you'll know. So went onto one of these sites, and I saw this image, you get lots of thumbnail images, and I saw this image of a girl having semen squirted in her face. And I say a girl because she looked like a girl, she looked really young, and maybe she wasn't, maybe she just looked really young, and maybe, she was totally cool with everything, but it really freaked me out, and I shut my computer down and cleared my cookies and did all that, and I was like, oh. And it just really got me thinking, because I was like, oh, here have I been feeling all these beautiful feelings of arousal, and now I've just gone into this area of online porn, and I'm feeling quite now. And so that night, I typed in a lot of stuff in Google, like good sex, great sex. And the one I really remember is I typed in beautiful sex. And in the first page of Google results, I got things like how to make beautiful women have sex with you. And that was some article with this shagger slapper thing that just kept flashing in the corner. And then it was Daddy loves to hate fuck Jap schoolgirl, stuff like this. This was in the first page of Google results. And it just really got me thinking about sex, really. And so I started writing this blog just exploring sex and just writing about sex. And I wanted to go on a bit of, I'm really sharing here, I'm so sorry. I wanted to go, I was single and I wanted to have some sex, but I didn't really feel represented by the sort of sex I was seeing online. And so I started writing about this, and anyway, I went on a bit of an adventure and I started writing about it. And I was being very honest in my writings, and one of the things I kept coming up with was just this, like, total hatred I had, really, about myself in many ways, and I just realised I'd been lumping loads of bloody hate on myself. Like, things like I'd just taken it for granted that I'd always said, I hate my bum, hate my bum, hate my bum, I really hate my bum. That had just been part of me, and then I was like, I'm a bit of a hippie, really. I'm not into hating. I'm into sort of peace and love. And why am I hating, like really hating part of my body? So I started looking at where all this hate had come from, and it didn't take me long to come from like the whole beauty idea that we're fed as women like constantly. And then so I started going, I'm not going to hate my bum anymore. My bum's always been here, like a soft cushion to sit down on if ever I should need it. I don't want to be hating it. I'm going to be loving it. Thank you. I've done some amazing things. Sat on my soft, comfortable bottom. I love my bum. So I kind of went through a bit of a process, and then I went to my boobs, and I've always said I hate my boobs, hate my boobs, hate my boobs. When I went into why I hate my boobs, it wasn't quite so comedy as the bum, because I realised I traced it back, I realised I hate my boobs ever since they just first arrived, because I was 11, and my boobs came, and I grew up with a son in my house, so my brother's 10 years older than me, so there was a lot of talk about tits, look at the tits on that, tits, Sam Fox era, it's like, posters of Sam Fox everywhere, and a lot of discussion about women's breasts. So as an 11-year-old, my boobs came, and I just felt that they were there for men to look at. That was just, that was just what I learned. They were there for men to look at, and mine fell short, and therefore I was just ashamed of them. So it's just, I hate my breasts, I hate my breasts. I really internalised this. And I'd never had this eureka moment of going, oh, amazing, I've got breasts, I think I've been a baby, I'm really sensitive, I've got boobs, yay. Never had that moment, because I just always, internalised this hatred. So, and I started going, I love my boobs, I love my boobs. So that was great. And then I started looking at sharing. Why I was such a pillock with men a lot of the time, to be honest. I've been in these relationships, the same thing has kind of kept happening. And one thing I realised that I hadn't been doing in relationships is really using my power. Like, it sounds a bit weird, but, I was quite successful in acting and writing and quite strong in my life. And yet, with men, I wasn't. I just wasn't, really. And I found it really hard to sort of express my needs to men. This makes me sound really stupid, I'm aware. But I found it really hard just to express my needs to men. And I was trying to work this out, like why I would find it so hard to say stuff to men about what I wanted and what I needed, and just to be really kind of, powerful in terms of bringing what I wanted to a relationship. And then I started, we become what we see, basically. So we're going to learn about relationships primarily from our mum and dad. So, and that made loads of sense to me, because my parents are in a really patriarchal marriage. They're amazing. They've been married over 50 years, and they're really sweet and they love each other. However, my dad is like the big Mac. He's sort of, my mum does, what he says goes, and he didn't want my mum to work. My mum didn't work. He's sort of gin and tonic Val, and my mum will make him a gin and tonic, and that works for them. But I've never heard my mum say, actually, no, I need this time to do this, or I need to do this. So when I looked at it like that, it didn't come as any surprise that I found it hard. Anyway, so I was exploring a lot of this sort of stuff on a blog. And then I was also thinking that, so often in society, women are presented as being there for men. I was just like, women's magazine, how to make him want you, it's always like, the beautiful princess is picked by the man. It's not really kind of women being proactive and going, no, actually, I don't want you, It's always that passive woman being, picked, or a woman trying to do something to change herself to be picked by a man. And I got to page, I thought about page 3 at that point as well, because I was like, here we are with the national newspaper, really showing that women are there for men. Okay, that's kind of the backdrop to what was in my head at the time. A bit of a mess. And then last summer, I still bought a copy of The Sun during the Olympics last year, because I'd grown up with The Sun in the house, and my brother was a big, supporter of the paper, and he used to say it's the best paper for sport. So the Olympics was on, and I was like, what's the best paper for sport? So I bought a copy, but I actually opened it in the shop and I didn't see a page 3 model on page 3, and I checked on page 5, because I'm very cunning, and I didn't see a page 3 model on page 5 either. And I thought, oh my god, the Sun's dropped page 3 while the Olympics was on. And I thought maybe because of editorial space, or maybe because of respect for different cultures, didn't know. Well, I was like, yay. So I sat on the train that day reading this copy of The Sun, and it was just after Jessica Ennis had won her gold medal. And I, in as much as you can be reading The Sun, was in a bit of an equality bubble. Because I was reading about, you know, women's, female sports personalities, and, you know, learning about women's sport, which we just don't ever hear about women's sport, really, ever. I heard Yvette Cooper say, women's sport gets the same coverage as men's darts. It's like bugger all, isn't it? Yeah, we just don't. But during the Olympics, it was a real exception to that time. So I'm reading on about Jessica Ennis, and I'm quite inspired. It is inspiring, isn't it? I was like, oh my god, bought new trainers during that period. Thought about taking up competitive sport, didn't. But yeah, I was really inspired by that. And then returned to page 13, and there was this just massive image of a beautiful young woman in her knickers. And yeah, it was really weird. It just like, first of all, it kind of felt like being slapped around the face and told it was a man's world. Do you know what I mean? You're suddenly like, reading about men and women, okay, that's not for me, is it? You haven't put that there for me. It was a really weird thing. But I found I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I think maybe the big thing for me was that hers was the largest female image in the issue. So, larger than any of the images of Jessica Ennis, even though she just won this tremendous gold medal. The largest female image was of the, you know, young woman showing her breasts for men. And images are powerful. Apparently the brain processes visual information 60,000 times faster than text. So images are powerful. And yeah, I just kept thinking, what's this saying about a woman's place in society? What is this saying about a woman's place in society? In a newspaper, to have this image there. And yeah, and I got a bit like, I don't want to say obsessed, but I was thinking about it a lot. You know, I twice woke in the night, going, in another thing, you know? And I kept thinking of just like loads of things really. I just kept thinking, in light of the fact, like 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 1 in 3 girls at school will be inappropriately touched. You know, in light of these statistics, is it sensible to be showing women as being there primarily for men's sexual pleasure in a newspaper? Is it sensible? It just didn't sort of make sense. I kept thinking it was very limiting to women. Like, this was a paper that wasn't encouraging the daughters or the women in this paper to be anything else except to photograph. They do a page 3 idol competition every year, so except to photograph their breasts and send them in, and they could live the dream of being on page 3. So it's a paper famed for its sport. It's not encouraging women to be sports people, it's encouraging them to take their clothes off and have their breasts photographed. It just seemed a bit weird. I thought about my female friends who have babies. All of them at some point have told me some story about, you know, I was made to move, I was doing breastfeeding, I was asked to move, I was like, this man was like, you look at me, you're tutting, or you... So being made to feel uncomfortable for breastfeeding in public, whilst we're showing teenage breasts often on page 3 in the newspaper, none of it made me sense. And then I kept thinking back to being young and hearing, and actually this expression I'd heard through my life, "Core, look at the tits on that." And it's quite frankly, I say this quite a lot on radio. I use this kind of "Core, look at the tits on that," and the radio DJ goes, "Oh, we have to apologise, because I've said the word tits." And that's like, the word you should be really outraged about in that sentence is that. "Core, look at the tits on that." Right, so this woman becomes an object, becomes dehumanised. And I'm like, well, you know, when we dehumanise people, you know, we know from history not great stuff happens to them, bad stuff generally happens, so we're not feeling this. And just kept thinking, you know, in terms of, you know, young girls now, we learn how to have really low levels of self-esteem, and I'm close to a lot of teenage girls, and it's heartbreaking. You know, I sat with teenage girls who are crying, wanting boob jobs, and they're not even finished developing. You know, like, and I just thought about my own groups of friends, and talking to these teenage girls, and like in my group of friends growing up, there's bulimia, there's anorexia, there's rape, there's sexual assault, and that's just kind of like normal, yeah? And then it's the same for these girls, and I'm just like, wow, man, you know? Yeah, anyway, so I was thinking a lot about this. And so I wrote a letter to the editor of The Sun, Dominic Moen, asking him to please stop showing the pictures. I said, I'll bullet point my reasons, because there are quite a few, and I wrote a 3-page letter to Dominic Moen, and I knew that it was going to do absolutely nothing. I was like, well, I've really thought about this a lot. From whichever way I see it, I cannot see these pictures doing women any favours. I've sent this letter, it's not going to do anything. And then I thought, can I feel all this passion and be the only one? think that was the big question for me. Can I feel this passion and be the only one? And the internet, being the amazing pool of free resources that it is, meant that there were a lot of tools for me to use to find out if I was the only one or not. But it was a big, it was like, oh, do I do a campaign? Do I do a campaign? Oh, no, I've never done a campaign, how do you do a campaign? A bit like that. So I literally just got a book out and I was like, okay, can I do a campaign? Who could help me? What could I do? What would I call it? You know, all these just like really basic brainstorming questions. I didn't have any money. I had a bit of money from books so I could live, but I didn't have any money to like put it into anything, to like employ anyone or anything like that. So yes, I brainstormed, no more page 3, sort of did what it said on the tin really. Thought, what do you need for a campaign? You need a logo. And I was like, oh, I don't know any graphicsy people who could do me a logo. And then I was like, oh, but my friend's ex-husband's got a t-shirt making business. We could print the words no more page 3 on a t-shirt. And I could photo someone in that, and that could be like our logo. And I was like, how would I arrange the words? Oh, like Frankie says, relax. I don't know, really like basic stuff. So got these t-shirts made and photographed my niece in it. And that became the logo. Thought I needed a petition would be good. Petition would be good. So I did a search online, best online petition sites. I found an article that listed 5. I chose change.org because it looked clear and easy to use. Set up an online petition in about 20 minutes. Set up a Twitter and a Facebook group and just literally started tweeting the petition to everybody I could think of on Twitter. And Twitter is amazing because you can reach everybody. It's not like Facebook. It takes a long time to build a community and people are closed off. Twitter, everyone's available. You can tweet Catelyn Moran, you can tweet David Cameron. You won't get response from David Cameron, but you can tweet anybody. So we just set about tweeting everybody. Quite rampant tweeting actually. I did get suspended from Twitter 3 times. If you keep tweeting people, they think you're spam. So they just suspend you for a little while. You can carry on. So yeah, and it was quite interesting. And I started it on the first day with my niece. And my niece is a student at Wolverhampton, and she was sat there with me, and she posted the petition on her Facebook page. And we just sat typing away, and she suddenly went, oh! And I was like, oh my god, what? And she said, come and have a look at this. And I went round to her side of where she was working and looked at her computer screen. She just posted the petition on her page. And what had happened is a load of like young guys had gone in going, tits, tits, I want to see tits, is this a joke? Tits, I want tits at breakfast, I want tits on my face, I want tits everywhere. It was just like, oh my god, it was like some stream of like tits and lols and stuff. It's like, what the hell? And it was really weird, and it was like at the same time, like some young women were going in and liking her status, and then we'd see that they were going and signing the petition. But it was a real thing of like I could really feel it in my chest. I felt really protective of my niece, but also it was like, wow, I hadn't expected that. I just, so, and it's probably interesting that happened on the first day because, I have been quite, I would say there's an undercurrent maybe of sexism like in our society, and it was kind of, it's maybe lad culture, we'd call the tits thing lad culture now, and in the US are doing loads of amazing work to combat that. But yeah, it was kind of interesting, and my niece, I think what I worried was, I thought, wow, this could really silence her. And because, people might just shrink back and well, it's not worth the hassle. And actually, as she went in, she answered every single comment. By the end of the exchange, which took her an hour and a half, people were going, yeah, all the best with it, yeah, good luck, I hadn't thought about it like that, good luck, and it was really like, wow, but it was pretty exhausting the first day. We got 73 signatures. But did slightly feel like we bled. But then at the very end of the day, got tweeted by a journalist, Caroline Creative-Perez, who's since won the Banknotes campaign and stood up to Twitter and faced all these awful rape and death threats. But she tweeted that first night and she said, I want to write about this, can I? And I was like, yeah. So she wrote this amazing fire in your belly article about it for the Huffington Post. She then wrote another 2 articles. So we tweeted that and put it on our Facebook page. And it was great because the petition also gave people space to write why they'd signed. And it was interesting, so to hear people's different reasons for signing. So we'd take snippets off there and tweet them. Yeah, and that is kind of how No More Page 3 started, really. And it was quite exhausting in the early stages. But, yeah, really exhausting, actually. Like, completely, really, really tiring. Social media is amazing. It's like amazing for building campaigns, but it's quite manic. There's something quite manic about Twitter, isn't it? There's stuff coming at you. And and it doesn't really go to sleep, so it's there from the moment you wake up to the moment you can tear yourself away from it, and so you can only really sustain that so long. I did have a bit of a crash in January. But again, these amazing resources, so the internet's just like magic. One thing we did, and I think this is really brilliant, it's so simple, couple had a blog. So like, the main things, Twitter, Facebook, petition and blog, all free and all really powerful. And one of the things we did on the blog was we wrote a letter, a support letter from MPs. So the campaign isn't asking for a ban, it's not asking for censorship, it's just appealing to the editor to drop the pictures. However, we got this letter from MPs, so if MPs wanted to support, then rather than people trading through all the thousands of signatures on the petition, there was just a separate letter so that people could see if their MP had signed. It's brilliant. So it's a tiny little letter, housed on a blog, and then what people do is they tweet their MP. Yeah? It takes 2 seconds to tweet your MP and say, would you put your name to this? And then quite often, like an MP on a Sunday night will be, yeah, add my name, really pleased to support. So just that simple thing that took like 2 seconds we've now got 144 cross-party MPs on it, a load of Lords, a load of MEPs, Caroline Lucas was, I think, the second MP to sign it. She's since stood up in Westminster, done a debate on that. I've been in to meet Ed Vaizey, Minister for Culture, with Caroline Lucas to talk about media sexism. It's been amazing. It's been really amazing. So it kind of carried on like that. We got, in the early stages, Kate Middleton was packed, topless, and there was a lot in the press about it. And a lot of the press thought, breasts, there's no more page 3 campaign. So somehow they kind of went from there to there. So it kind of gave us a bit of exposure. And it felt like the press were quite keen to cover this. Claire Short, famously, as an MP, stood up in the 80s, and she tried to get legislation passed to stop these pictures being allowed. And she had overwhelming support, more people, there's many more eyes than no's in the House, but there's a group of Tory MPs who kind of belittled her and were quite juvenile in Parliament about it, and it got wrangled, and the bill was never passed. But the Sun also mounted quite a horrible campaign against her. They superimposed her face on that of a page 3 model's body. They called her fat, jealous, ugly, Killjoy Claire, she was called. Even though she had thousands of letters of support, and they were actual letters, don't have all that without social media, but she had thousands of letters of support. And 12 were from women who actually had page 3 mentioned to them while they were being raped. But the Sun was going Killjoy Claire, just really horrible. And even they picked it up again in the 90s, and again in 2003, I think it was, they picked up, she was interviewed, and she mentioned that she still, didn't approve of these photos. Again, there was another big haul against Claire Short. So I think, the press were aware of that. There's a history about speaking out about this. So there's been interest from the press in it. So it kind of carried on like that. Always tried to sort of, it's quite a tentacled approach, isn't it, a campaign? How do you get, talk about picking your bloody targets. Pick the Sun, it's the most powerful newspaper in the country. Not really necessarily renowned always for its moral fibre, or moral compass, if you like. So how do you get the biggest selling newspaper in the country to drop one of its key bits of its brand, if you like? If you mention the Sun to anybody, the 3 things they'll probably mention are page 3, sport, football, funny headlines, something like that. But page 2 will pretty much always be in it. So actually you're campaigning to ask them to take away a big part of their brand. So it's never probably going to be the easiest and swiftest of campaigns. So it's always kind of needed a bit of a many-pronged approach. So one thing, we're trying to get MPs support, so MPs talking about it, obviously trying to mobilise public support, trying to keep the debate alive. So social media, sharing information, there's been so many blogs written about this campaign, it just is so amazing. And poems and songs and people being really creative with getting the message out. Appealing to advertisers to say, what I find quite interesting is some of the big advertisers are the 4 family-friendly supermarkets. So the big advertisers in the Sun, family-friendly supermarkets. You would never have Jamie Oliver there, doing whatever he does with the turkey, page 3 open line on the kitchen next to him. You'd never have that in an advert. And yet they're very happy to put money into the Sun, which supports page 3. So it's always an interesting one. So you have targeted advertisers, targeted Lego particularly. Lego, for 2 years, Lego gave away free Lego. Just gave away free Lego during half term in the Sun. So it's quite a weird thing, really. So you have the Sun, which has page 3, obviously, but on the front cover there'd be pictures of Lego. It's kind of quite weird, isn't it, to be selling toys, maybe. So we kind of mounted a bit of a campaign against Lego, and they've now stopped doing that promotion with the Sun, so that was good. Appealing to advertisers. Then in January, I kind of had a burnout and it was a bit shit, really. Yeah, because you're kind of like running on all this kind of manic kind of social media-y stuff, and for me it was like I was having to like, I was having to talk to people this sort of thing, and also talking to like, spoke at the Labour Women's Conference and stuff, and like it's quite a lot of adrenaline and nerves, and that you're sustaining that for quite a long period of time whilst also constantly being on Twitter, and yeah, so I could only really do it for so long, and I just really hit a wall in January, and I just felt spent. I just felt totally spent, and I hadn't really realised it, but like you go for ages without eating, and then suddenly I burst into tears, and I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten, I'm hungry. So I'd eat, and I feel a bit better, and I realised my shoulders were around here, and just a bit weird. And then so I got to the point in January, I just felt really spent, and I didn't know, just felt just drained, just felt like I'd given everything. I was just like, I've got nothing left now, I've got no inspiration. I just felt totally spent. And it was pretty dark. It was one of the best things that actually happened, because so I'm feeling like this, and I'm aware that I've got nothing to give no more page 3, and actually my energy is really going to like fuck it up. But at the same time, I'm getting emails from like 15-year-old girls saying thank you so much for this. I've always hated this, and I'm really sharing stuff. I really found like solace in the Facebook page, etc., etc. So I'm like, I can't let this go, but I can't sustain it. So I wrote 7 emails to people who I knew from the Facebook page, who I'd met at a couple of protests, and I knew they were really passionate about No More Page 3, and I knew they seemed really nice, and I hadn't met all of them, but I just wrote these emails saying, hello, I'm Lucy from No More Page 3, and I'm kind of like fucked, and I don't know what to do. Would you consider forming a team? And they all came back with just the most amazing words, and the big caps locks yes. And that was kind of how Team No More Page 3 started, and it's been incredible. So yeah, and we keep making the team bigger. It can't be too big as far as I'm concerned. It's amazing. So we all kind of exist in a closed group on social media and man everything together. So we have a timetable for social media, so no one is hopefully doing too much. There's quite a lot of burnout watch between us, because it is quite, you're so involved and you feel so passionately, you don't want to stop, you want to keep going. So we all kind of watch each other's backs in that way, and we share stuff, and it's really amazing. It's really amazing. So I think we've got now 15 of us, and we'll make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And so yeah, and then to be honest, it's like one of the most amazing things working with these incredible people. And yeah, I think what we're doing is really important, but I think how we do it is really quite special as well. So yeah, go to North Fish Street, London. So now we've got. So in June this year, the Girl Guides they voted to back us publicly, and that was amazing. They've got 500,000 members, and they're young advocates groups. Really loved the campaign and really wanted to get on board, and they're so on board. So they came out, and it got loads of great press, and one of them even went on the Today programme and debated with the Glamour. I would have been so nervous. And that was really brilliant. And I've done workshops with them recently, and they've got more things lined up for the end of the year. They're really with us in trying to they really want to get the decision makers to change their minds. That's really amazing. We also had this great thing again. Social media just rocks, right? Rupert Murdoch is on Twitter, and I'd always had this kind of like fantasy. I just love the fact that you could tweet Murdoch and say, "Hi Rupert, can you just call like the editor of the Sun just to drop this in? Thank you." And I just love the thought that maybe you could do that. I just love the thought that you could like reach Rupert Murdoch, who could change all this in an instant. Anyway, one day my teammate Lisa, one Sunday, decided to do a Tweet Murdoch day. So she just wrote a blog, put it on the blog, free resource again, and said, let's all tweet Rupert Murdoch. So everybody set about tweeting Rupert Murdoch, and Rupert Murdoch responded to a supporter who had like 43 Twitter followers, and he just said, she said, oh come on, I think it was we're also over page 3, get rid of it, I can't remember the exact words, and he said, yeah, don't know, but considering, what should we replace it with? Glamorous fashionistas, he said. Yeah, bless him. Hasn't quite worked out that women do insane think things, not just there to be looked at. Maybe I'll get there. So yes, that was really exciting. Thank you, Rupert Murdoch, because Rupert Murdoch tweeting us got loads of exposure for us. We got like 20,000 signatures in a week. I went on Mexican telly. It was very exciting. Cheers for all that. So it kind of like exploded the campaign again. And now since then, more and more support groups have come on board. Like today, it's International Day of the Girl, and the Girls Brigade, they voted, 97.5% of them voted to back us, so they've come on board as well. They've just written this long, beautiful letter to David Dinsmore. The British Youth Council, they represent 220 youth groups. They voted, they support us. Loads of teaching unions, the National Union of Teachers, National Association of Teachers and Head Teachers, National Association of Teachers and Lecturers, they will support us. Unison's the biggest trade union with 1 million women public sector workers. They voted to support us. The National Assembly for Wales voted to support us. Who else is loads? Rape Crisis, Women's Aid. We've got a big list of about 40 charities and organisations who are working to end violence against women. We work on body image, self-esteem issues for young women. We've got testaments of support for all of them. They will come on board. So yeah, so we kind of just keep on doing it. And it's kind of people-powered, I think. You know, we've had no big power come in and try and help us. There's been no celebrity who's kind of, you know, gone on Jonathan Ross and spoken about us. It is all people just doing what they can to get the message out. So we keep on. We had a bit of a success in August because the Irish Sun dropped page 3. So, yeah, and people were speculating whether the UK Sun maybe is testing this in a smaller market of Ireland, and maybe they're going to do that here. We've heard, we don't know, we think it's true, we don't know, that the Sun editor has appointed 2 female executives to look at reinventing page 3. That's interesting, who knows. Day before yesterday there was no page 3 topless picture. But it's always interesting because the Irish Sun has stopped the topless pictures, but what you still have is a picture of a woman, for example, in a swimming costume. So it's not kind of objectification free, it's not sexism free. I would say it's a step in the right direction. I would say it's a very small one. I would say there's many more to go. But as I said before, we are asking this newspaper, this powerful newspaper, to dismantle a big part of this brand. They're always going to do it on their own terms. Yeah, and I think the more we get debate out, I think in many ways it's got to be a long haul in a way. Because when the pictures go, everyone's got to know why they've gone, in a way. So, yeah. But I have to say, it does feel quite exciting at the moment. The momentum feels really good. You know, like this week alone, University of Essex, University of Manchester, University College, Oxford have all voted to stop selling the Sun. Well, they have page 3. Yeah, lots of, I don't know, it just seems like every time you open your emails or Twitter or Facebook, there's somebody going, yeah, I stood up for this business and I said, you know, that you shouldn't be supplying the Sun for your customers because it's got page 3 and the business said you're okay. And it just feels like people are really kind of stepping up and talking about it, and it does feel like the momentum's building. Yeah, so we keep on. Yeah, we keep on. We do get a bit of shit sometimes, though. Yeah, a bit of shit. Oh, not really too much. I think we're quite nice. Maybe I should say that. Yeah, we've had a lot of, we haven't had like the big rape and death threats that Caroline has had, and Stella Creasy has had, for example, but we have had a bit of that. But not the sustained attacks that they have. And, you know, a fair bit of fuck if you've got shit tits and stuff like that, and you know, not great stuff. And it's nice being in a team now because we can kind of, you know, chat about it and have online hugs and stuff to get through it. But it's not always the best. The main things people say to us are like, if you don't like it, don't buy it. I'm like, brilliant. Why did I think of that? Yeah, that kind of doesn't work for me because I think actually I was most affected by these images when I was age 11. I didn't buy it, you know. I think, you know, I know one of my teammates, she used to work in a bar, Sun on, you know, page 3 on the bar, she's serving, just constant, you know, talk about her breasts in relation to the page 3 image. She was sexually assaulted twice, you know, she didn't buy it. You know, so many of these issues, these 12 women who she mentioned to the library didn't buy it. You know, you hear stories about teachers asking, you know, children to bring in newspapers for painting, suddenly having to explain why there's naked women in a paper to a 6-year-old. That teacher didn't buy it. You know, there's so many issues where, so I think actually, and we're all affected. When the largest newspaper in the world effectively says, "Shut up, girls, and get your tits out," we're all affected by it. So yeah, so that's one thing that we hear. Yeah, what else do we hear? That's my favourite one. If you don't like it, don't buy it. And the other one I quite like is, "Oh, you're just jealous." Oh, you're just jealous. And I quite like that in a way because I do think sometimes people don't get it. And I think, you know, sometimes, we've got loads of male supporters, so if I say, but sometimes who are amazing, and like some of the best things written about the campaign have been like by men, and they're just awesome. But there's some men who've been like, oh, you're obviously just jealous, or you're improved, but the jealous thing I find really interesting, I think it's because no part of the male body has been sexualised and commodified in the way that the female body has, and in particular the female breasts. So I always quite like to turn it around for them. And I always say like, well, just imagine, for 43 years we'd seen the male scrotum on page 3. Not penis, just the scrotum. Young, big, hairless, would have to be hairless, scrotums every day for 43 years, and imagine you were standing up after 43 years and just saying, look, can we use the scrotum pictures? I've got sons, and I want them to grow up and feel like they can do anything in the world, but one of my sons is really worried about this part of his body, he really wants surgery, and I'm like, it's not important, I really want him to not worry about this. And my other son walked down the street, and this woman was going, come on, show us your balls, and grabbing him. Can we just lose the scrotum pictures? Can we just lose them? I said, that's like me turning around to you and saying, you're just jealous. So I quite like doing that, and I get to say scrotum a lot. Quite like doing that on the radio. So that's kind of it. We get quite a lot of people think that we're trying to get something banned, or we want sort of a law passed, and we're not. This is just a polite request to the editor to stop showing the pictures. It's quite a relentless polite request. But we're not after censorship. So some people, do say, do you give us that? And we're just like, sometimes we do feel like you're constantly saying, we're not asking for a ban, we're not asking for a ban, we're not asking for a ban. But that's something that's levelled us a fair bit. And it's quite interesting how when the Sun writes about the campaign, the Sun knows clearly we're not asking for a ban, but they always refer to it as balmy calls to ban page 3. That's what they said about it. And I always think, yeah, they're so balmy, aren't they, all those teachers? They're so balmy, the girl guys who are calling them, So, anyway, yeah. So, yeah, and then one of the other things I was asked to maybe mention is thinking about the future of feminism. I think I can't really talk about the future of feminism, really, but I think maybe we can. I know that sometimes people say, like this, they talk about this new wave of feminism. And, I just probably know the Everyday Sexism Project, which I just think is the most beautiful, brilliant thing ever. I think Laura Bates is a genius. I think the Everyday Sexism Project is so good, because I think what has happened for feminism, somehow, someone's done a bit of a hatchet job on feminism. I think the media's done a bit of a hatchet job on feminism. And I do notice it in that way of like, you often hear the word feminism when it's written about in the Sun and sometimes in the Telegraph and probably other papers, but they're the ones that springs most to mind. You'll often hear the word feminism either preceded or coming after it, a word like nagging or nonsense or something to really put it down. So I do feel that somehow the media's done a bit of a hatchet job on feminism. And I do think that social media and the speed of which we're sharing information now, and the speed and the willingness for people to open up about these things and to form communities and to feel that strength within a community is really shifting that. It's really shifting sort of feminism, if you like. I think people are a lot more sort of proud to say, I'm a feminist. And I know that I think in the last year, Youth and Feminists said it's been like over 200 new feminist societies set up. That's like quite amazing. We're hearing about young women at school who are setting up feminist societies and being asked to speak at schools and things. So it's really quite exciting. But I have heard that some people are saying, this new wave of feminism, they're fighting the wrong things. And I find that quite weird, because it's like, that almost implies that there's a big club, like we're all in a big club and we all vote on what to fight, what to sort of stand up about. And it's not that at all, it's just, I just got, Times of Noble page 3, I just felt I was losing sleep over page 3 and I just wanted to see if I was the only one. So that was the motivation behind that. It's not like there's some big board that are saying we're going to fight, we're going to do this, we're going to work on this now. It's not the case. It's all quite organic. I think that how this movement is happening is from quite organic things that have happened. I know Laura Bates just felt she had 3 things that happened to her in the space of a week. Once she was on a bus and a guy was touching her leg, and then she was like walking down the street and there were 2 guys and they were talking about really sort of violent things they wanted to do to her sexually. And then I can't remember what the other one was, but there were these 3 things that happened very close together, and she realised that actually, this has been happening to her again and again in her lifetime, but why weren't we talking about it? Why weren't we talking about this? So she sort of set up the Everyday Sexism Project, which is just amazing. It's just a site where you just write in your experience of sexism. If you've had it for guys and women, it's not just for women. And now she's had, it's global now. She's got had thousands and thousands and thousands of entries. Again, quite an organic thing that just started quite small, and now it's just gigantic. Caroline's banknotes campaign. She's just got, she just sort of saw red one day about it. She was like, no, we can't let them eradicate that. The one woman we have in banknotes, we cannot. And then that was her thing. So I think, I don't think. I feel like it's unfortunate when people go to me, oh no, I don't, that's actually one thing that is quite annoying, when people go, oh no, I don't agree with the no more pay, because women's magazines are much worse. So it's like, because that's like, I feel that's just like looking at a really messy room, and just going, it's all such a mess, I just can't be bothered to tidy any of it. Do you know what I mean? You may as well start with the corner, and let's start with page 3. It's an icon of 1970s sexist culture, I would say. Shall we just start with that corner? Then maybe, does anyone want to do women's magazines? Anyone want to do women's? We can't do women's magazines, I love it. There's a lot of stuff that actually we're talking about, and I suppose if I can share anything with you, is that if you're pissed off about something, chances are you're not the only one, and the internet offers some amazing free resources for you to use to try and affect some change. You won't regret it. And I'll give you a hand if you need any advice. I'm going to stop yabbiting at you for now. Any questions? I've just talked your head off, haven't I? Oh my god. Any questions? Hey.
I was just wondering if you had any sort of life in the sun? Did they say anything?
Not really, because we've had 2 editors now. It was Dominic Moen when we started, and had nothing from Dominic Moen. Never got a response from my letter. I know, and I sent it recorded delivery, so we did get it. Never. And in the early days, like when I was doing interviews, quite often there'd be somebody who used to work at the Sun, or somebody on the other side that I debate with. And then at one point that just stopped, and they just said, no, the Sun refused to send anybody or give a comment. So nothing from the Sun. And then David Dinsmore took over. When did he take over? July, I think. And he's a bit more, he's on Twitter, so he sometimes sort of says things on Twitter. I get a bit annoyed. Because I feel like he's trying to because we're quite light-hearted, especially how we do Twitter. It's like one thing we were really trying to keep it, it is a serious issue, and often we're kind of dealing with some quite really hard things, but we really keep the tone kind of light, as much as possible, and really inclusive. And I think sometimes David Dinsmore just sort of comes in being a bit jokey, and I feel he's sort of taking the piss, and I don't feel this is a thing to take with myself, so he annoys me. But he's a bit more forthcoming, and I know that we've had responses to emails when we've emailed him. But the emails, so sometimes he responds, they tend to come through from a woman called Rachel Richardson, who's the editor of Fabulous magazine. So somehow I think she's been put on watch to keep an eye on us, sort of thing. So she reports to him, so quite often we get, so we'll email David and then we'll get a response from Rachel. It's a bit weird. I don't know. So, we've sent him quite a lot of letters. We celebrated our year anniversary in August. I love the way we celebrated a year of not having got what we were trying to do. It was an amazing day though. So we just sent loads and loads of letters to David Dinsmore and got all supporters to send loads of letters. Have we had him back? No. And everything he said really publicly has been, no, we're not getting rid of page 3. He said it's a good way of selling papers. This is what he said. Great. Lovely, isn't it? I've got this picture in my head of all the girl guides going, how much would it cost to start respecting women, David? And all emptying out their piggy banks. But it's just my weird vibe. But what I find interesting though is pretty much now every time a Sun journalist or editor goes on the radio or on television to talk about something, they always get asked about page 3. It was quite interesting hearing the senior political editor of the Sun being interviewed just before the Sun went behind a paywall online by Richard Bacon, because Richard Bacon was just going, but what about page 3? You're a serious journalist. That must be really embarrassing. Must be quite a shame. What about page 3? He just kept on saying it, and you just think, the guy would have hated that. You could hear in his voice. And I heard that at Balkan, there was a Sun journalist down there trying to get quotes from people, and all people were going, well, what about page 3? You've got page 3, what are you going to do about page 3? And so there's so much now of, I think that's great, the debate is there. And we had, there was a guy on Twitter who used to work for News International, and he was the one who said on Twitter that the Sun had appointed 2 female executives to look at reinventing page 3. And he said that the Sun hates the campaign. He said because it's clever and well measured or something. Was it clever and well organised? Which those of us in the campaign laughed at. But he said that, and then he said they hate having to keep justifying page 3. And I think that's a really key thing, because I think there's only so long really you can keep justifying the unjustifiable. So I think if we keep on, they'll have to sort of stop. Yeah, hey.
And what do most people say when they try and justify page 3? Obviously, like people say, if you don't like it, don't buy it, but what is that actual justification?
Yeah, do you know a good reason for it? Yeah. No, there's no real, because really, I mean, what is it? It's just showing men and women's breasts. I mean, people have said, Dominic Moen was at Leveson, and he was called to Leveson to talk, in this particular instance, to talk about page 3. And he started off, and this is Leveson, right? And this is Dominic Moen, who would have, editor of a paper, had lots of journalists who are good with words working for him. You would have thought on that stage, he would have kind of pulled out the big guns, don't you? And he said, I think it's meant to represent youth and freshness. Brilliant. So if we take it from the editor of the previous editor of Sunday, it's meant to represent youth and freshness. I know. So we had a little day on Twitter and Facebook going, so you're an editor of a newspaper and you want to represent youth and freshness. How would you do it? But no one decided that it would actually be by showing mending women's boots. So yeah, it's kind of no big reason as far as I know. Oh, but the one thing we do here sometimes is it promotes positive body shape. Yeah, but then again, this is saying, but this is this whole thing that's like this whole argument, and I just don't get these arguments that's going, oh, well, that's worse. Do you know what I mean? It's like in the playground, when he started it, that's worse. I don't know, it seems so ridiculous. So it's this idea that fashion models are thinner, and actually page 3 models tend to be larger, so therefore it's promoting a positive body image. No talk about how it's that, it's always, white, young, big-breasted, still very married, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, yet to find a good reason. Hey.
In response to that, I work in quite a laddie environment, and whenever I've worn my t-shirt, the main defence of it is that it's the woman's choice.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, we get that a lot. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I get this. I mean, I get all this. I get that it's a woman's choice, but how much of a choice is it when you grow up and your largest image of a woman is of the woman showing her breasts for men? So, we've had glamour models, writing and saying, I wouldn't have done this had I not grown up. I just thought that's what it was, to be successful, to be a woman. I went into it at 18, 19, because this was what was fed to me. It's really, Sheila Hayden, she was really articulate about it. She was like, this is what was fed for me. Why can't we show women in other roles? Do you know what I mean? Can we not represent women more fairly? So there is, but again, it's this page 3 idol, this kind of, it's just like, do this, it's brilliant, it's life-changing, live the dream of page 3, you've got a newspaper saying that. It's interesting because, we've had a lot of glamour models supporting the campaign. The very first ever page 3 model, Stephanie Wan, came out and supported on the radio. Linda Lusardi came out and supported CNN. Nina Carter. So some of the bigger names from previous generations of page 3 models have come out to support, and some more recent models. There was a woman called Emily Oldfield who was, I think she came second in a page 3 idol competition, but she never did page 3. She did Lasman, she did other things, but she felt the wrong context because kids saw it. She just didn't want to do that. So she totally disagreed with it. Carla Brown, who's a glamour model who's done page 3, she says, she's really articulate about it. She's like, it's mainstream objectification of women, it shouldn't be in a paper. Is this context of it? You see, the context of page 3 is, it's like page after page of pictures of men in clothes doing things, like running the country and achieving in sport, and then this massive image of a woman standing there in her knickers. So is that context? Because the campaign's not against glamour modelling at all. It really isn't. And I can understand how the current page 3 models feel, oh, you're going to put me out of a job, so we get a bit of that on Twitter. But, I would, page 3 is a brand. Murdoch's not, one thing about the Sun, they're not stupid. Page 3 is a massive brand. It will still exist online, it still exist behind a paywall. It just doesn't have to be in the context of a newspaper. So I don't see why these women have to be put out of work in any way. And I know interestingly, before the new editor took over, it was the old editor, there were 11 issues of The Sun consecutively where there wasn't a topless image. So on page 3 they would have the page 3 models, but in Help the Heroes t-shirts. And I don't know whether they were experimenting with stuff, because quite often we hear, it's the women's choice, no one's forcing them, and they do great work for charity. So, and you can't put these women out of a job, they do great work for charity. And actually, so it was quite interesting that The Sun was doing this, because it's still showing the models, but in these t-shirts. And some days the t-shirts were so ridiculously short, they were like under boobs. Sun's so weird. So that was quite interesting. I didn't know whether they were road testing something in that. So that answered that. Yeah, I do get it. I mean, I get how, because many, models have said, but I feel, people say it's disempowering, but I feel really empowered doing it, and I get it. I really get that women can feel empowered. If you fall into that narrow criteria of, beauty ideal that is fed to you, and you get to be able to pose there in a newspaper with all that exposure and to get money, I totally get how you could feel empowered for that. However, I think the pictures disempower women generally. So it's not about. I totally get that could feel empowering, but I just do think. I keep thinking. You go back to a teenage girl. Feeling that she's got a sex. A 14-year-old girl feeling she's got to send topless pictures of herself. She looks around to society to say she feels uncomfortable about doing it. She looks around at the society she lives in. Page 3 is just saying that's what you're there for. That's what you've got to do. I just feel it's just disempowering. People talk about. One thing we do here as well is people say, oh, but there's so much worse online. So much worse online. Why are you worried about page 3? And I think, and this is really interesting because I've told my all the stories. So I'm very interested in porn. And I think why I'm really interested in it is because 99% of porn is made by men. So page 3 was, started by men in 1970. In 1970, a group of male newspaper people decided they wanted to see teenage breasts in the paper, and in 1970, so there were like 26 female MPs out of 630 or something like that. It was completely male-run society, male-managed media. So the decision to put, teenage breasts in the paper would have been very easy. Interestingly, the models only had to be 18 in 2003. So, the models were like 16, so in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But what I think is so what we're seeing with page 3 and with internet porn is female sexuality being presented by men. And I think, you grow up seeing that topless image, and that's disempowering for women, and then you hit porn, and some, not always, but some studies show that 88% of online porn shows acts of physical aggression towards women. And, never in porn do you see, could you stop, that's really hurting, I don't want to do that. So it's kind of, passive, willing, all this stuff happening. But what I'm interested in is talking about how women feel about this. This is our sexuality. How do we feel about it being presented like this? Are we comfortable with that? Is this the sexuality? Is this our sexuality? Do we feel comfortable about it? So I'm kind of, I think I'm really curious about women talking about sex. I think actually, and just getting in on this dialogue about sex and sexuality and how it's presented, because it's quite weird, isn't it? If we're women, but our sexuality is presented by men. So I think that's one area where we're not equal. I just really feel that. And it's interesting because I'm doing it's quite a cool thing actually. I'm presenting a pilot for a documentary. It's all about feminism, and it's about, it's just literally a cross-section at the moment about what people think of feminism. So it's like some people are really into it and some people are really against it. So I get to meet these really interesting people. And a lot of them hate me. You're basically well. I went to this conference on porn. It was really interesting, and I interviewed this porn star, and she was amazing. And but all these interesting things that she said, like one thing she said, my sex life is really vanilla, it's really kind of normal, but in the stuff I do, I have to do it much more hardcore. And that's kind of because sex has got more and more violent in a way in hardcore. That I know people who were there, they were saying that actually what's like. Okay, so what used to be hardcore is now normal. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of getting more violent. But what she did is she mentored young women going into the industry to teach them to say, I don't want to do this, and to feel that they had a control to say no, because there's a lot of women who suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome after coming out of the industry, or from having worked in the industry. And she was saying, and this happens because they do things that they're not comfortable with. But I would say, why do they do things that they're not comfortable with? And it's because every time we're not seeing women standing up. We're not hearing that. We're not hearing the no's. And we're kind of, I just think we need to get in on this dialogue about it. So I'm quite fascinated by it. I just went off on a weird tangent. Yeah, oh, hello.
I was reading somewhere in people's athletes and boys who are dominating and said that the PhD is part of the British society.
Yeah.
And with people still support the PhD, do you think that's true?
Yeah, it's part of our society, sadly. I know that. Yeah, I think he said. I think Ron said that it was a British institution, and I find this quite weird because Larry Lamb, who's the editor who introduced it, regretted it before he died. The very first page 3 model is come out in support of a campaign against it. As far as the British institution goes, the key players aren't that particularly proud of it. And what I said, because I started obviously the campaign last year, and I was just like, we've just, at that time, we'd just seen the best of Britain, if you like, and tradition and history celebrated on the world stage for everyone to see in the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and there wasn't a page 3 model in sight. So I think really it's something that actually, I think we're realising is part of another time, it's part of a kind of 1970s sexist culture. And so much has changed in that time, and I think, we've got to keep evolving, keep sort of pushing for more and more change.
If, or I'd say when, this happens, and there's no real page 3 in the same,
Yeah.
what then? What can this movement then be used for? So I think one of the really interesting things about it is not just that we're a base, but that people are confident in having a debate. So you said just now about how you weren't against language. So is there limitations in that respect, or can you use this kind of newfound confidence that even now can that be used?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the campaign, we like the team, we really like working together, and it's quite amazing. And I think we've all got different things that we're really passionate about, so we're all kind of fighting. I don't really know about fighting, but yeah, working towards the same thing. But like one of my teammates has got a son, and she was really alarmed at a lot of the rape jokes and pictures that were coming into his Facebook feed, and she's very much interested in rape culture and talking about rape culture, and I'm probably, sex and porn is probably what I want to talk about, and somebody else is very much more interested in the kind of body image, self-esteem issues. So we've kind of there's lots of collective energy for various different things. So I think what we'll do when we are successful, is set up a charity really and work towards keep championing, calling out media sexism, and then probably, if possible, trying to go into schools and do workshops. Like I've done some workshops about campaigning. I've really enjoyed them. Just the fact that you can start a campaign with very little, just trying to get people. If I've got anything to to give and to offer other people who might want to do that, then I'm really up for doing that. I think the rest of the team are as well. So so to set up a kind of umbrella thing, definitely keep on, because we're quite realistic that. I mean, I have a dream, really, that the Sun would just say, and I think they should, I can understand they'll go, what do we do? Do we lose it? I've heard that. Loads of Sun, there's some editors, they don't like it. David Banks, who's a former deputy editor of the Sun, went on radio and said he didn't take the paper home because he didn't want his kids to see it. The editors don't even like it. It's so insulting to the readers. That's what really gets me, that they think it's okay to put in the paper for their readers, but they actually wouldn't take it home to, for their families. So what I think they should do is just come out really openly and just say, actually, we've been asked by teachers, girls, to drop these pictures, and actually, all these charities that are working to end, sexual violence and violence against women are asking us to get rid of this. We think we should, actually. We really love women. We really love, we know you, the readers, love your daughters, your sisters, your mothers, your partners, and actually, we think you'd want to do anything you can to make society a little bit safer and more respectful and kind for them. So we're going to, we hope you all agree with our decision, but we're actually going to stop these. The models are still employed online, still wearing their t-shirts or doing their work for charity, but we're actually going to lose this in the paper. Now, I think they should just kind of come out and be honest, but unfortunately they'll probably do it on their own terms, so we'll probably have a picture of a woman straddling something imaginary in a swimming costume. And so there'll still be kind of further to, to go, really. And there's all sorts of stuff, like the Mayor is pretty classy in how it represents women. So, there's other things that, we probably want to be talking about. And also, yeah, getting behind other campaigns and seeing if we can help them. Yeah, there's lots of talk about beyond, so it's, yeah. But maybe a bit of doing yoga or something first.
Hello. Would you be in favour of backing the Labour's calls for more sex and relationships education in schools?
Yeah, definitely.
So many boys don't know what consent is,
Yeah,
and it's terrifying.
It's really horrible.
Why?
It's really sad, isn't it? It's horrible. And you hear things like, they have rape corners in the playground and stuff like that. And and some of the stuff you read in the TES is really shocking, like what teachers are saying. Yeah, I think it's all about, as I've been saying to you, I think, we should be talking about sex. I think we've done something weird with sex. And we've kind of done that weird thing of swept it under the carpet, talked about it in a weird way, let online porn take over it, but where's the positive dialogue about sex? You know what I mean? So I think that kind of needs, and I really think the whole, and I'm really inspired by the campaigns. Like the campaign for consent is set up by a load of people at school, these young, amazing young women. I did a panel of them with this Lily, who's she's on GCSE year, she's 15. She's unbelievable. Oh my god, I could never have done that at 15. At 15 I was too busy going, look at me, I hate myself. But she was just amazing, so amazing. Really brave and really just passionate. Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of people say because, online porn is suddenly kind of exploded into our lives. So people are seeing, a lot of stuff that, maybe, you can't undo a lot of stuff you've seen, can you? I've seen a woman be penetrated by a dog on Facebook. It's there's just a lot of stuff that you kind of think young people are kind of absorbing all that. We don't really know how it's going to impact them. So as much talking about it as possible, really. Yeah, and I think the sex industry is an interesting one. What I was really fascinated by speaking to this, this porn conference is there's no union. So I was really inspired by this woman doing this mentoring work, but there's no body sort of empowering her and paying her. She's just doing that, and people are linking her up. There's obviously a real need for that if she's doing it, but there's no kind of union supporting it or where people can go or that can champion stuff. So so much, but definitely supportive of that. And we've kind of been on page 3 of side support. It's awesome.
When you go into schools and talk to young children, how do you make them not embarrassed to talk about stuff like this to girls?
It's tricky, isn't it? I think what's really good is if you can separate them first, because what you quite often hear is the young women are very have a lot to say on their own, and then put in a group with boys, it can tend to be the boys' voices that kind of take over a bit. And I think there's a historical thing where women, we're kind of still evolving into equality. For hundreds of years we didn't have a voice, and I think there's still this kind of finding the voice thing with women. So I don't know. I have done a few. I tell you who's brilliant at it is Laura Bates from Everyday Sexism. She's really amazing at talking and about it. I don't know. I'm quite open, and so I just keep sort of being open. And I like that I know a lot of young, got sort of friends and family, and lots of young women in our family, and I'm kind of like that. Embarrassing Auntie Lucy's asking me about sex. And it wasn't nice. Was there lots of foreplay? Really embarrassing. Auntie Lucy, but So, I think, I think it's I have to say I was quite shocked. The last school's talk I did, I was really quite shocked by talking about rape statistics and sexual violence statistics. And one, sort of heard that, and then somebody put their hand up and said, yeah, but what if she's really drunk, then it's not rape. And then someone said, yeah, but what if she's wearing something really showing off and really showing off her body, then it's not. And then someone said, what was the other one? Oh, but lots of women have sex and then regret it the next day and then say it's rape. And it was wow, these are serious rape myths, thinking that's, and then, and I found I had to turn around things with the gender, so I had to sort of swap it around. And I was saying to the young man, it's you going out, and you're feeling really good, and maybe you're wearing some shorts, and you have a couple of drinks because that's nice, but you get attacked on the way home, but it's your fault, So you have to, to turn it around, and then it's, And then that was kind of, sometimes just doing that is quite, because we don't realise how far we've gone really, like we kind of all accepted that we kind of, the rape culture, rape thing is just so ghastly. Yeah, so it was a bit of that. But I'm probably not, Laura Bates has done a lot, I've got some coming up, but so I'm probably not the best person yet to talk to. Yeah.
Okay, one more question.
One more question?
I've already asked one, so I should.
Okay.
I agree with the intentions behind your campaign, and I've got my full support.
There's a but.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that the problem of page 3, the objectification of women, I understand that as a particular manifestation of what you actually refer to as the underlying current of sexism. And I can think of other manifestations of sexism which, you also refer to. You refer to, the images on the internet. You refer to the way in which women are assaulted. I think there's elements of sexism in student culture as well, unfortunately. And I think that tells me, at least, that sexism is a very strong force in society. And I think it is so strong because it's linked to how we produce goods and services and profit. You actually said that, an editor said it's a good way of selling papers. So, there are profits to be made from this. So really, I just wanted to say that, and just say to everybody that, sexism and other forms of stereotyping, for example, racism, they're extremely powerful. A lot of us, take it for granted. So I think, we are up against it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really interesting. And Doc Brown was this great comedian and rapper who made us a song, and we'll finish this song, it's just brilliant. But he's really great at talking to students, and he goes in as part of a project called Great Men Value Women, I think, and he goes and he speaks in schools, and he's just amazing. And then he breaks into a rap, and he's really funny and just amazing. And he said, and he breaks it down. So he was talking about a Sun front page, which is a picture of, what's her name, Helen Flanagan, who says she has the best breasts in the whole world, and then superimposed on page 2. She was on the cover, and it was like she was naked on the front cover of the Sun, but just hello boys across her breasts. And so Dr. Brown was talking about this to these students, and then he said that would be like having a black man on the front of the Sun holding 2 melons saying yes boss, or something like that, and we have, we just got to keep calling it out. We have to just keep calling it out, otherwise, like you said, people are just going to keep using it. And it's so, I think it's quite boring, isn't it, and unoriginal, isn't it, how sex and sexism and so on. One more maybe? Should we just take the camera?
Yeah, of course.
Hello.
Hi. Given how much time and sort of effort you put into the No Page 3 campaign, if tomorrow one of your best friends were offered to be on Page 3, and you have how many opportunities or financial gains you would get from it, what would you say to her, or how would it affect your relationship with her?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I can't. I'm all about peace and love, so I'm not gonna be like I'm never talking to you again. I would just explain where I'm coming from. I've had friends who've done porn and magazines, and I've spoken to young women who wants to go into it. Interestingly, young women agreed with the whole page 3 not being in the paper thing. But also what is interesting, and I don't want to say, it's kind of weird for me because I've spoken to, it's kind of hard. Alex Simwise is a former page 3 model, and she speaks really amazingly. I love her, she hates me. But she writes, she's got this amazing energy when she writes, and she talks really openly and honestly about being a glamour model. And she says people say it's empowering, but actually we were pandering. And she said she says she wouldn't recommend it to her niece, and it's very close to her niece, and she wouldn't recommend it. She said that quite often you get, men say things like, or tweet or however they communicate, but say things like, you're so beautiful, I want to masturbate all over you. And if she says anything even slightly negative back, it's straight away, you bitch, you whore, you only got where you did because you got your breasts out. So she talks about that. So she talks about kind of like, looking at, that side, whilst the sun is saying it's brilliant and life-changing, she's talking about kind of this other side. And she does talk about why people do it. And often, she says that sometimes, people have something maybe to prove. So it's very, very different reasons why people go into it. So maybe, if it wasn't my friend, I'd maybe look at why she wanted to do it. But I suppose we have to accept, this issue isn't with the women. It's with the editorial decision to show these pictures in the paper. My God, there's loads. Can we? But yes.
Yeah. I was just thinking because when we're talking about sexism and stuff like that, it's a lot about objectifying women like sexually, but there's much discussion about female sexuality in an open and healthy way. And you were talking about porn and stuff, and I was just wondering if you have thought of like more healthy and good ways of promoting like female sexuality, because a lot of it is actually brushed under the carpet. So the woman is there only as an object, but her desires and what she wants is kind of taken away.
Like the big end thing is the money shot. It's always the male money shot.
Yeah.
So female pleasure.
Would you promote,
male pleasure, sorry.
For example, more porn made by women for women and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think, it's beyond this. This is the kind of what I really want to explore and write about, to be honest. I'm really fascinated by it. Because I just think, I think it starts with us talking about our sexuality and how we feel, how we feel about this. There's a great woman, Cindy Gallop, who set up this thing called Make Love Not Porn. And she, on one of her websites, she dispels all the porn myths. She was like, about how in porn films the man ejaculates on a woman's face. In real life, not so much. It's like, it's so kind of like, just sort of breaking down stuff. And I think, and I've met this other woman who's setting up a thing called the Ethical Porn Partnership, which is all about almost like having a standard for these porn films that will go on her website, which is to say that the models are overage and that it was all kind of, there's a whole criteria for it being kind of, feeling that that it's kind of come from a good place, if you like. I think I'm more like, I really think it starts with talking about it. I think there's something about, because I think, when I talk to young women, the thing I hear most often from young women I talk to about sex is, and this is shocking how many times I've heard it, is I don't know what's wrong with me, but it really hurt. So it's always the self-blame, and always the pain. And it's like, how can we all sort of, sex, it shouldn't be hurting, you shouldn't be feeling shame. So it's about us feeling that we can create the sex we want, and we can be powerful and talk about it, and we can start shaping this. And I think, then it could be quite exciting. I think it's all exciting, isn't it? Let's talk about sex.
Sorry, we have to stop.
Okay, sorry. Well, we're going to the bar if you want to ask questions in the bar. We'll go to the bar. Thank you so much.